Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. We have a long form episode for you today. It is a tradition like many others where we are really going to get into the nitty gritty of the NFL draft, as we are about, 48 hours away from the official NFL chime for around the Titans are on the clock. I did have a good belly laugh this morning when the big kind of headline at The Athletic was the history of the NFL draft chime. Like, we got nothing else for you here, guys. So we'll really get you caught up on the important stuff about the draft.
It's iconic.
But yeah, I know.
Yeah, that was something. It's like, shit. It's like, you can tell they had a spot in their schedule, like when they were planning it.
Yeah.
It was like, all right, whatever the big story is, because there's always a big story, we'll put it here. It's like, shit. Call Randy. We need something. We need an article. Somebody's got to write something real quick.
Yeah.
So, you know what? The fun one today anyway was, God no, I feel terrible. The announcer that passed away.
Oh sure. Mike Patrick,
R.I.P., which a voice of the old Sunday Night Football.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody posted a clip of him. He was the first person to announce the 1st and 10 yellow line.
The yellow line innovator. Yeah.
It's like him explaining it like, hey, this is not really on the field. This is us doing it electronically. And and at the end he says, I think you're going to like it.
I dig it. Well, without further ado, let's introduce our guest. We are not here to do this by ourselves. Andy and I have done plenty of navel gazing on the daily pods about the NFL draft, and we got some specific requests. You are the MVP of the draft betting content cycle from a lot of the folks who really care about our pod at the Deep Dive Discord. So without further ado, first ever guest and first guest we've had on here in a long time, except for, of course, our good friend Cal to do the Masters. But welcome to the Deep Dive, fantasy log guy, Nick Guarisco.
That's right. Hey, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. And hey, I like that some of your followers I guess appreciated my insight from a betting perspective. I do, of course, bet the draft. We can do that in Louisiana, but I'm mainly known for mocking the draft. But either way, both are really awesome. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys. I
dig it. So at this point, your main focus is like you're gonna have a final mock tonight that goes into the huddle report. That's part of the gamification now of being as right as possible on the mock draft. Is that kind of your number one focus beyond just the prop markets?
Not tonight.
It's tomorrow.
For the one that I submit to, I believe that most of the deadlines other than the huddle report are actually on Thursday around noon-ish. I think mock draft database, a couple of those are the ones I usually submit to. But yeah, the huddle report, I know a lot of people kind of gripe about the midnight deadline tomorrow night. So, but yeah, I've been tracking my mock history for a long time. Several sites have, and luckily, most years I've been on the very, very, very accurate side. Although last year I'm still kind of reeling over what I consider a disappointed year. eight hits last year and 28, I think, first rounders.
Yeah, I think last year was probably my worst mock. I've only been mocking for a few years. One of the things I didn't realize is if you publish it, what's the one site there? Mock draft database. They'll just find it. You don't have to turn it in.
They take a wide
find you.
Yeah, so I write them. I'll put mine on Bleacher Nation. That's a Chicago sports site that we own. And one time I was just trying to find it, so I typed in mock draft Andy Molitor to try to find my article, and it wasn't even the first hit. It was the mock draft database. I'm like, these son of bitches stole my mock draft. What are they doing? They're aggregating my data. But it's a nice way to look back at all the ones that you've done. I have a bad feeling about this year as well.
What?
The lack of information makes it really hard. And if you don't nail like the top 12, you're going to struggle down the line, because everyone that you screw up in that spot is usually someone who's, if you're saying this guy's going in my top 12, he's almost certainly a first rounder.
Okay.
So every one of those you mess up is a double mess up, because that person is probably going a little later on, and
Yeah.
you have, 2 bad picks. Like if you can't nail down, the top end of the draft because of the lack of information, your mock's going to be messy. But everyone's going to be a little messy when we just don't have the info.
Okay, well, let's nail down the top of the draft. And I guess before getting in there, do you, Nick, do you share Andy's sentiment that this is an uncertain draft, or do you feel like that's being a little oversold just because we have so many teams that need so much near the top, and the quality of players from 4 to 40 may be marginally better?
I actually think it's oversold every year except for this one. I think every year people
Okay.
Well, no, every year people say, hey, this year it's so unpredictable. Last year, however, it really, I'm so disappointed in myself for not having a good year last year, because last year it was set up to have a pretty strong mocking year in terms of accuracy. The first 3 picks were basically in. Neighbors to the Giants was a popular selection there. A lot of people flip-flop JC Latham and Alt, and right there, you could have started, in theory, if you didn't mock a trade or anything, 7 for 7. There were no total surprises. I had Latham and Alt flipped, which I think about every night before I go to bed. But but because that is the difference. You're right, Andy. The difference between these really accurate mocks are, honestly, once you miss one, it means you automatically miss a pick later. And if you miss one early when other people are getting the hits, that usually the accuracy wanes as the draft progresses, right? It becomes infinitely more harder to get hit on a correct pick as the draft progresses throughout the 32 picks. So you do really have, top 12 is a good number. I usually say top 10. You do typically, if you're going to end up with one of the more accurate mocks of the year, typically I usually shoot for about 7 of that top 10 needs to be hit. And then after that, honestly, you're really hoping for about 3, maybe 4 more. Some of the most accurate mocks in the world only have like 11, maybe 12 team matches. Last year was an exception. Jason Boris had 15. That was the second best mock of all time, like in the history of mocking, behind Josh Norris about 4 years ago when he hit on 16. But yeah, so last year numbers were up, but the average mock had about, like, when I say average among like the top experts, I should say, had about like 8 right, I would say. This year, however, where we are now, it's much harder because it's a quarterback issue is what it is. Last year, what made the mocking more accurate was that quarterbacks are kind of, the analogy I like to use, guys, is they're kind of like the corner pieces of a puzzle where you know which teams need them typically, and you know which ones are high end. So you can kind of slot them there, kind of like you're building a puzzle. You slot those quarterbacks at the quarterback needy teams first. And that usually gets you about 3 picks right in a mock on average. However, this year, as you know, not only do we aren't sure which teams are going to take that quarterback chance. It's going to be later in round 1 where picks are harder to get by them. And we also don't know the order this year after Cam Newton. So not only do we not know the teams getting quarterbacks, we don't even know the order. So right there, I agree, even though the first 3 picks seemed a little like they're locks, I would say, and arguably the first 4 picks, I do agree, Andy, that this year is going to be much more difficult than last year. And I think some of the best mocks in the world are actually going to have about 12 picks right, as opposed to like 15 or 14, which you'll see in other years, including last year.
I love that. So you have the top 3 in pen?
I'm afraid to do it because I wouldn't say pin. That Giants one, McShay just came out yesterday and said there are people in the building arguing for Shedeur Sanders. He mentioned a couple of times that how much homework the Giants have done on Shedeur Sanders. He mentioned several times that ownership may get involved. It's a desperate franchise. However, at the end of the day, McShay is the only one really kind of beating that drum. And he put it, I think, 10% on his podcast. So he didn't want to like mark it down and pin. It's something that I personally have in my mock, which is Ward, Hunter, and then Carter. But I don't want like any viewers of this show to be like totally stunned when they're like, oh, everyone has it. I do think that there's like, we're just kind of playing percentages, as you know.
Sure.
And I think that there's like a 5% chance that something might happen. And sometimes it just happens, right? For whatever reason, the panic situation last year, for example, like So you're just trying to give like the likelihood of something happening and kind of focus on range of outcomes. I think there's like a 5% chance that the Giants take Sanders at pick 3. But again, that's not very likely.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, the Carter for me and probably is, I would say, like closer to 99 at this point. And really what moved me from say like 9, because he was once you kind of digested every big board in the universe, there's 2 blue chip guys, Hunter and Carter. And if you're picking top 3 and you're not taking a quarterback, you're taking one of the other 2 guys. It all kind of checks out logically. And at first you look at the Giants and you're like, oh man, they are really D-line rich already. Like they're going to go Carter with all this other talent they've stockpiled there. Okay. It's cool. And then like what flipped, but I'm still like 90, like they're just going to take the blue chip guy. And then out of the blue, somebody floats intel that they're soft on Thibodeau. They're listening to offers for Thibodeau, and then you're like, oh, okay, so it's just done. They're gonna take Carter. Then like that's all I kind of needed to hear to sort of like to go to your puzzle analogy. It's like you got one half of the middle piece. Now you know what the other piece is. It's like if they're really kind of, if they've gone to that level of considering their roster construction, then it's pretty clear that they've decided on 3, and that. I just haven't seen a lot of people with really willing to stick their neck out that Shedeur Sanders needs to be kind of in the conversation as a top 3 talent guy. It does give them latitude to pass. So I think I want to ask you.
I'm softening. I'm coming around to your spot, and the biggest thing that I try to push when it comes down to this is I'm not watching hundreds of hours of film. I don't watch college football hardly at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my evaluations to have no bearing on anything I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say like 90% of the people that talk about mock drafting, draft betting, draft anything, their opinions shouldn't have anything to do with it because they have bad opinions. There's probably like 5 people in the world.
Well, I know who's going to be good.
No, I know. But there's like 5 people in the world that don't work for a team whose opinions on like how these players are actually going to look that actually maybe matters. Like the people that are doing the best of this are doing enough information and, like you said, Nick, they, kind of a process of elimination, figuring out where the pieces fit, looking at, how other teams have done this in the past. It's been so tough. And that's another tough part about this is I feel like maybe I'm living in the moment on this, but I think we've had more GM turnover in the last 3 years than average. On average, you don't lose like a half dozen GMs every year, it seems like. So, we have a bunch of teams that we don't have information on how they've drafted in the past because it's not the same group of people doing it. And some of the people in the media might have the same connections anymore. So we don't have that info pipeline. But I mean, the biggest part of this is kind of going into it clear-eyed on the last day and not letting what you feel about these position players, and that's what I've been trying to do when I've argued with you on quarterbacks. I think they all stink. I think Cam Ward stinks. Like Cam Ward's like the 5th quarterback in last year's draft, right?
Well, he's going to a very dysfunctional franchise. So if it all breaks down, we shouldn't be surprised.
But the fact that the 2 things were quarterback can change your fortunes and people can talk themselves into a big arm. I can fix her. She's got a few other problems. And the fact that there's like, remember what I said earlier in the week, the quietness around some of the teams that took quarterback in the first round last year, where they just kept their mouth shut. I think that's an overarching theme on everything. Everybody's keeping their mouth shut now because it doesn't behoove them to really leak anything, but especially quarterback teams. I think somebody absolutely stupid is going to take a quarterback in a dumb spot. And I mean, it'll be one of the teams we think, but it'll be like, really? Because it's not even going to be that they took a quarterback, Drew. It's going to be, there's somebody going to be on the board where it's like, oh my God, how is this guy dropping? How is this the 4th tackle, the 5th defensive edge? One of these guys is like, this is maybe a game changer for something you need. And then, Pittsburgh's just going to go quarterback, or the Saints are going to trade back.
This is a brilliant segue because we got to find the other 4 corners of the puzzle, Nick. Who else is taking Who else? Well, the other 3 corners, I guess. Maybe there's only one other corner of the puzzle because we got 3 pieces already. But whatever the case is, the other corners of the puzzle are missing. And at this point in time, I'd like kind of your probability distribution of only 1 gets taken, 2 get taken, 3 get taken, and the degree of confidence with which you are going to actually put a team down with a quarterback going the first round, and what evidence kind of leads you down that road.
It's tough to mock a team in the 20s with a quarterback if it's not the Steelers. A lot of people are making the argument, and I've made the argument for maybe the Rams being kind of a sleeper team. If Sanders is available, you would get to play. A lot of people are maybe talking about the Rams as like McVay kind of getting along with Deion Sanders and I guess feeling that vibe. And it's an indoor situation. Stafford's contract is year to year, as they put it. And it's a situation where you're kind of setting up Sanders for success with Puka, with Devontae Adams in McVay's system. And most importantly, whereas the league's shifting toward mobile and athleticism at quarterback, McVay has had a successful history dealing with Jared Goff, dealing with Matthew Stafford, who are pocket quarterbacks. The Rams would be my next guess. If I had to stick and pick, like there's no trading in mocks or anything like that, the Rams would be my next guess after the Steelers. Right now, there's only 1 quarterback outside of Ward in my mock draft, and it is the Steelers, like you mentioned, Andy. It's I have them taking Dart right now. If I had to guess, I think Dart is more likely than Sanders and Milroe to go in round 1. It may not be the Steelers. It may be a surprise team like Seattle or most probably a team moves back in. Maybe it's the Saints. Maybe it's a team trying to jump the Saints into the 20s to take these guys. But you're right in a sense where this doesn't seem like the type of quarterback class where teams are jumping into the teens or top 10 to do it. It's probably more of the 20s. And I feel bad for Sanders because it just doesn't seem like – it seems like the media kind of made him out to be something that maybe he was not. And I think and right now I think he's going to be probably a solid quarterback in the NFL, but teams just don't need quarterback in the 20s, and they don't want a solid quarterback. My guess is on if another quarterback goes in round 1, it's Dart. Although the counter to that is he's the one that just kind of rescinded his invitation to the draft. They invited him to the draft. He said yes initially, and then he decided, you know what, I'm not going to go to the draft anymore. And that's a little sketch from my end. So it's especially considering that Milroe is still going. Sanders never accepted to begin with. So, I kind of like the under on the 2.5 quarterbacks going there. I'm not sure where the juice is. It probably is on the under at this point. However, Dart would be my guess at this point if I had to say. I'm hoping that we get more intel from Pittsburgh because they're usually a team that's very transparent about their, interest, if you will.
Yeah, but people put that one in pen every year in the final mock.
Right. They made it so obvious they were going to take Najee Harris that everyone was just like, okay, well, 90% of mocks have this. And it happened, right? They were a little more and I've been doing this a long time. They were a little more sketch with, quiet with the Kenny Pickett situation. In fact, Daniel Jeremiah was one who mocked it in his final mock on the day before the draft, and that was seen as big news because they had met with Pickett throughout the process, but they were really showing a lot of interest in Malik Willis.
Sure.
I'm wondering if history kind of repeats itself here, where all the prominent interest was shown in a Jalen Milroe, but then they ended up taking maybe Dart or something, because to me, I'm looking at who's going to fit Arthur Smith's system the best. And, that emphasis on play action, that emphasis on deep passes, that's something that Dart kind of does successfully. And Tomlin mentioned, or according to Colin Cowherd, Tomlin wanted upside from the position, whereas Milroe and Dart probably give you that ceiling that Tomlin wants to compete with the other AFC quarterbacks. I'm not sure if Sanders does in Pittsburgh.
I think if we do get the 2.5, if it does go over, I feel like it has to be somebody trading back now at this point.
I think so.
And the reports that I've heard now, there is some.
You need a trade for a second quarterback.
Well, I really do think Pittsburgh's taking one.
You do?
I'm like 50-50.
I think they're taking a D lineman.
They don't have a quarterback on the roster right now. You do need one of those. I do think they're taking one, even if they do hop back a little to do it. But now there's a little bit of smoke and heat coming off the Giants liking Dart more than anybody. And I could see there's like 7 teams that would be perfectly fine trading back kind of in the 20. The Vikings are a huge candidate to trade back with. They don't have anything in the chest this year. They'd love a few extra picks. Everybody from we've said this over and over, everyone from 15 to 50 is about the same. You trade back, you let the Giants come up and get their second pick. They get their quarterback. Maybe they take Dart. And then, the 2.5 is hinging on Pittsburgh, maybe, the Rams, maybe, and then obviously the Saints maybe trading back in.
The Browns
maybe trading back in.
Yeah.
So
Sanders probably.
I think it's dicey, and I think it comes down to it might be like the 28th pick, and you're sweating that 2.5 pretty hard.
I agree with you.
I'm not getting involved in that market. I don't think.
Yeah, I have very little action on under 2.5 as well. But I was just price based because it used to be like plus 270. Right. I was like, this is crazy. Like it could be 1, guys.
Yeah.
All right. So the other kind of important part about sort of the edges now of your mock really are the other teams picking in the top 10 and what order are they picking in? Do you feel like the top 10 has some shuffling to be done before we know what order that is? Or do you think ultimately there is a glut of teams trying to trade back, which, as quoted very eloquently, I thought, by John Lynch today, usually when there's all of these teams trying to trade back, there's not a lot of action because there's no one going up. What's your kind of general vibe on the rest of the top 10 in terms of positional, just which team's picking where?
General vibe is that if any movement's going to happen, it's probably going to be for Ashton Genty. It sounds like he's the only player. I know he's a running back, but it sounds like he's the only player who's a special enough talent in this class after Hunter and Carter that teams may make a play for. It's possible the Jaguars legitimately really want Genty, and it's been a well-kept secret until now. And that happens. And it also happens where you have this new regime here, and they may be split organizationally, according to Albert Breer at least, where maybe the scouting department and personnel department wants this player, the GM wants this player, and the coaching staff, or whatever it is, maybe ownership, whatever it is. You have situations where teams may be split. I think that the Jaguars' interest in Genty is probably real. I imagine he's probably a top 4, maybe 5 player overall on their board, and they're picking at 5. So, however, I can't help, obviously, my first instinct was this is to get the Bears to move up, right?
Sure.
It feels that way.
Yeah.
The Bears, among other teams, like anybody who's even texted, like, hey, guess what? This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So Genty's probably the one that is the one player who teams are going to move up for, whether it's the Bears, maybe it's the Raiders get antsy and they really want Genty and they try to flip one pick there. It's hard to say at this point. Right now, Jacksonville, a lot of people in the industry believe that the draft starts with Jacksonville. And I don't have any good intel yet on whether it's a smokescreen or whether they're serious about taking Genty. I will say that a lot of big name reporters have kind of conceded and said, hey, it's no longer Mason Graham. It's going to be Genty. So you better do something. And I don't know if that's because Jaguars are putting it out so publicly or if it's legitimate. It's really tough to say at this point. So it's one of these situations from a mocking perspective where you have these coin flips and you just kind of hope that you get them right. It sounds like Genty's going to go to either the Jaguars at 5, the Raiders at 6, or the Bears at 10, even if the Bears move up to get them. But yeah, so Genty's kind of the most interesting player in the top 10, in my opinion here.
Okay. In the interest of kind of informing the folks, the most liquid market that I know of on earth for betting the draft is Bookmaker. It still sucks. Like you get $500 a click, but they'll let you click as many times as you want. So you can generate a real position. Genty reopened today after their planned outage. He reopened at plus 100 to be the 5th overall pick, currently sitting at minus 200 there. So there's been about 25-ish clicks on Genty to go 5th today by someone. So this is probably not someone covering their ass who has giant prices on other players or anything like that. This is someone who either believes that he is going to the Jags 5 or that a trade has been agreed to in principle for that 5th pick for Genty. And I agree, like if there's a trade, it does seem like Genty would be the target, which is even still blows my mind. Like I thought we got rid of the stupid GMs. Like it seems crazy to me that you would give up any assets of this year's draft or future drafts to go take a running back in the top 5 when this is a very, very deep running back class. And also
trade him to Howie in 4 years anyway.
Well, that's the other thing is that it feels like, and I was going to save this for later as far as like what do we think happens down the board thing, but it feels like a lot of teams are just trying to move off their current running back situation. Like you really going to trade assets and go get Genty when, there's like, there could be a guy like James Cook, like he doesn't seem especially happy in Buffalo right now. Like there's guys who have, equal or less wear on the tires. You are not going to get second contracts on their current teams that you could take off people's hands. And I get wanting to move or at least upgrade from Travis Etienne. Etienne was terrible last year. And ultimately, if you're not satisfied with your running back room as of right now for next year, then you want to address it, fine. But it also seems absurd to me that you would have the clear 32nd best defense in football last year. You go through free agency, you kind of do nothing, and you're not going to use a top 5 pick on, an anchor to help your talent deficiency in defense.
That's my question, Drew.
All right, I guess so.
What was the genesis of Graham? Was the genesis of Graham just, did we do that? Was it the mock draft community where it's like, oh, this fits perfect, and then everybody started mocking
December 10th, someone who would know texted our chat that the Jags board was Hunter, Carter, Graham, Campbell, Genty.
And it's possible it was. It's possible that Graham was high on the board. The genesis of it, or the kind of the foundation of the mocking world's fascination with Graham to the Jags was that Gladstone comes from the Rams, and they just kind of fortified their defensive line from last year with players who, I don't want to say they weren't supreme athletes, but I want to say that they valued college production, I guess, over like RAS and athleticism with all these defensive linemen the Rams took, and it worked. Like it was great.
Yeah, they nailed a lot of those picks. I mean,
they did.
Everything they did work out.
In Graham's like the prototype of, hey, baller in college, awesome football player, but he's not going to test well. And really what happened actually was that when the Jaguars GM got on his first presser, he literally kind of, I don't want to say he took a shot at Trent Baalke, but he made a comment. He said, look, we're going to get players who are intangibly rich that elevate the ecosystem. And later on in the press conference, he said, yeah, we're not focused on we're kind of doing away with drafting high athlete tools there. And I don't want to say he took a shot at Baalke, but it was more like, hey, the Jaguars are moving in a different direction. We're going to focus on football guys and character. So the two names that came up, at least from my memory, were Will Campbell and Mason Graham as the Jaguars targets, because they kind of fit the mold there. And now that Campbell's going to the Patriots, it seems, it kind of left Graham. It's a position of need. But yeah, this Rams stuff in this new GM's kind of role in wanting more production and more football character as opposed to traits. I think that's kind of the genesis of the mocking world saying, hey, this is a real solid match here.
Yeah. And again, we had very little info in February, I will say. And then somebody who's connected says this is please keep it quiet. This is the board. You believe it. And two of those guys are gone. You're like, well, I guess they're going to take the third guy then. Because
I was saying that too.
And it fills a glaring need, which is they're the worst defense in football.
A month ago. Right. But I mean, before we solidified Ward, I mean, there were conversations we had where we were saying, like, the 5th pick is locked in and we don't, that's about all we know. Like, we solidified that pick before we solidified Ward as 1. Like, there was still some back and forth on that.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the profile.
It's been so long. You know?
He doesn't have the profile of a top 5 pick. And at the end of the day, I think that's why people are so easy to move off it. Now everyone's looking at hindsight and being like, hey, a defensive tackle who didn't really test well, this guy wouldn't go in the top 5 most years, even though he was amazing last year on tape. I'm wondering if he's more of like a 5 to 10 pick as opposed to top 5 pick. And I think that's why people are so easily kind of moving off it now. Yeah,
no. And hey, look, if like we'll find out obviously soon. But if if the dust settles and this was all an elaborate ruse to get people to give them future assets, and then they end up with Graham anyway, or they end up with a different trench guy anyway, like, bravo, like, well done. Yeah. Like, you've executed your plan perfectly. Like, for sure, the first year that Joe Shane and was with the Giants and they had the 2 picks in the top 10, like, they had we trade in the cloak and dagger stuff happily, and there was a lot of cloak and dagger stuff that year about like the meeting that Thibodeau had with them, the dinner with Shane and Dable, and like just massive fallings out. And you're like, well, I guess he's not going to be a Giant, and like they were the ones that were behind the Evan Neal injury stuff, and then they ended up taking those 2 guys, right? So like first time GM definitely matters. The fact that the relationships between the GMs and the info people have all broken definitely matters. And I would even say that just generally, like, the fact that these GMs are not tied to the decisions of the previous regimes anymore definitely matters. Like, there's nothing stopping anyone from taking the same positional player that the regime took last year if they have given up on that player already based on their personal evaluation.
He's not my guy. I didn't do
not my guy. Not my guy.
Not my circus.
Yeah,
and the new offensive coach, Liam Cohen, makes it also easy to pivot as well. I think a lot of people, when all the reports saying it's Ted McMillan or Ashton Genty, everyone's saying they're thinking in their mind, from like a fantasy football perspective, even like, oh, the next Mike Evans is going to be Ted. Like, that's who Cohen sees as in his offense. He comes from the Bucs. And, Ashton Genty, he was amazing with Bucky Irvin. Genty's even way better than Bucky Irvin. So we can have this amazing offense in Jacksonville. So I think a lot of people are easy to move off it because, and actually that is like the kind of the gut instinct when they hire a new offensive or defensive coach. Like, I know Aaron Glenn's going to want to take a defensive player. Like, he's not going to the Jets saying, hey, let's get some offensive skill players in New York. He's going there wanting hard-nosed football. And I think that Liam Cohen here on the Jags is saying, hey, I want to, we have Trevor Lawrence. Let's make this offense awesome. We have Brian Thomas. Let's get Genty back there. Let's have some stars. And this is what I specialize in.
Genty better help them score 35 points a game, or else they're not winning more than 8 games with this defense. So, again, like I'm fine putting Will Campbell at 95%. I'm fine putting Genty 5 now at 67%, which is what the market is saying. Which leaves us with a handful of teams in the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 range where maybe the players they expected to be there are gone, and maybe the players they expected to pick from to be gone are available. Do you get a sense that the bottom half of the top 10 is going to be trench, big bodies, skill positions? Like, what's the rest of the top 10 look like for you?
All of the above. I think it's going to be skill. I think it's going to be trench based, but Tyler Warren could be thrown in there. Of course, to the Jets, maybe the Saints, possibly the Bears if the Bears aren't that team that could move up to 5. I think one thing that's factored into the betting market at pick 5 is like you mentioned earlier, is they might have some kind of principal trade in agreement with Chicago. But if Genty goes 5, it actually makes mocking a little easier, I would say.
Yeah.
Although I want to be careful. I mean, a lot of people thought that the Chargers and Vikings had a trade in place last year for moving up for McCarthy. And then the Chargers are like, no, we're going to stick and pick and take Alt. So, I mean, I would be careful with it. But yeah, to answer your question directly, Jalen Walker is a guy who's probably going to go 6 through 10. I even heard a lot. Albert Breer has been so consistent about Walker being an option at 4. And I just want to float it out there that if you mentioned 95% Will Campbell, that 5% for me is Jalen Walker, that 5% there. So and then what that would just mess up everything, because what would happen there is I actually do think the Jags would take Will Campbell, not to get all complicated here, but I actually do believe that if Will Campbell was available, like he would be the pick for the Jags. But anyway,
it's hard to pass on the top tackle if you don't think he's going to be there and suddenly he's there.
I think he's intangibly rich, as the Jaguars.
Well, and the same thing goes. I'm kind of in the same boat with Walker. The more I read other, the 5 people that I trust, or
they love him,
stuff from teams, like he seems like the missing piece for like these defenses, like. And he could be a lot better than this. It reminds me of the Zach Bond stuff where maybe not even close to the same situation, but like they just plugged him in and it wasn't even like a great fit. I don't know, from what he'd done before, they bring him in. It's like, oh fuck, this just worked. Like he can play all over up front.
And I think
feels like
really like his character.
I don't know that Walker needs to go somewhere where it needs to fit. Because I keep looking at like the Jets, and the Jets have, Muji. I don't know shit about Muji. I don't know what he's doing. Is that how we say his name? Drew, or I'm pretty sure.
I never heard it spoken.
We have an unprecedented run of like new GMs. I mean, you can even count Wolf if you really want to, because we don't have a lot of, info on what he's done there. But like the stuff of the Jets is like, oh, this one fits. We don't know shit about the Jets' brain trust right now. Mm-hmm. We don't have any information. They've been absolutely tighter to clamshell. And we're 100% sure he's a linebacker, right? By position. They're going to list him as a linebacker. Yeah. Jets to draft a linebacker was 23-1 yesterday. I'm like, I feel like that's a surprise pick more than 5% of the time. Like he just seems like every spot he goes is a mistake with some of these other guys that they're thinking about taking in those spots, especially if it's like a Tet McMillan that nobody likes. If it is your third, if we're looking at third offensive tackle, if you're looking at Banks, even Membu at some points, if you don't need somebody on that side. So I really wonder where Walker goes, and I think it's higher, and I think I'm going to mock him quite a bit higher than some other places.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him. I think 6 through 10 is the realistic range right there. I want to say 6 through 9. I don't think he doesn't seem like a player that the Bears would probably take based on their history there. However, I mean, I could be off on that, but I just don't see that being a fit. But to your point, a lot of these teams want the character that he's going to give them, a team captain. So to your point, I actually like the Jets kind of surprise call there, because Aaron Glenn, I just mentioned, what we do know about the Jets is that Aaron Glenn has changed the culture there. So like when I'm mocking, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to mock some, jerk off to the Jags if the GM's saying, oh, I want intangibly rich guys who would elevate our ecosystem. If he's going to put an emphasis on character, we need to mock accordingly. And the Jets, I mean, that is what Aaron Glenn is. I mean, he's an old school defensive coach. He wants good tacklers. This is what we know about him. So can we find a player who kind of fits his mold? And to your perspective, like, I don't know the fit with Jalen Walker per se.
It's not the perfect fit. That's the bugaboo, is like it doesn't exactly fit their system.
And they just
maybe we don't know.
But
we don't really know what the system's going to be.
But Aaron Glenn might want a team captain. He might want a vocal leader. So I don't think it's off the table. I don't think Walker to the Jets is off the table at all. I think Carolina is the team that probably really wants him. Carolina seems like it's going to be a coin flip between Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker. Yeah. So they're probably one of the easier teams in the top 10 to project from a mocking standpoint, because it really does. I would kind of be surprised at this point if they don't go with Mykel Williams or Jalen Walker. Okay. There's some people floating out Tyler Warren there. I could see it. You can make an argument for it. But to me, this is more like a 40%, then 10% Warren and like 10% other.
Ted
so that's like as good of odds as you're going to get, like at pick 8. So Carolina is a pick that a lot of people are going to get right, in my opinion. So you want to be on the right side of that coin flip, whether it's Michael Williams or Jalen Walker. The Saints went to the UGA Pro Day. They spent a lot of time there with Walker. He could be another pick there. And then even the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders just kind of new organization. We want new leaders. Yeah. They need defensive talent, obviously. But if I had to put money on this, probably the Panthers, that kind of area around pick 8 is where Walker probably should fall.
Okay. Yeah. So we're not that. It doesn't sound like
that's the popular pick for sure. And
I mean, it is. Michael's getting steam though. Michael's getting a lot of steam actually with people that I trust for Carolina.
Where did Glenn come from, Drew?
He was a Detroit line.
Yeah. Did they ever draft a linebacker higher than people thought?
Yeah. They've done.
I keep coming back to like how much input he had in that draft,
question.
Especially and then getting Branch too.
Yeah. I guess here. So it sounds like we're all pretty much in step here. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to say 6 is worse. We would say something. 6. We would say something like.
It's either
I'm going to say 80% line, either offensive tackle or D line. Right, like Membu, Graham, Banks, or Michael Williams or Jalen Walker. Like those are like the potential candidates at 6, and that's like 80%, maybe 20% total shock and surprise. Who the hell knows? 7, it sounds like I would put at least tackle for the Saints as the most for the Jets as the most likely. Tackle for me is something like 50%. I would put tight end something like 20%, and I think 30% chance of surprise there. And
maybe
then
Mason Graham again. If Mason Graham falls,
maybe
you have to find a team for Mason Graham. I would
be surprised. Yeah,
I would put Tyler Warren a little higher than 20% for the Jets. I think it's very likely going to end up being one of these offensive tackles, either Banks or Membu or Tyler Warren. I've heard a lot of people say that Banks is higher on the Jets board than Membu is, which I find pretty surprising considering the Jets need a right tackle, and that's where Membu played. However, I'm not going to question whatever intel that I could get. So if that's true, it might not matter because maybe the Raiders do take Membu anyway, and then it's just Membu and Banks back to back, and then it's a kind of a runoff with the tackle. And then the Panthers can take a pass rusher there. But I could see the Jets going Tyler Warren for sure. Now that would be kind of his ceiling, in my opinion, his floor being the Colts. But I could see kind of the Jets, the Bears, and the Colts are probably the best. I would say should be the top 3 odds on Tyler Warren, with maybe the Saints coming in 4th.
I will kind of sprinkle my opinion on Warren is almost entirely shaped by his over-under price in the market. He's drifted now to -185 to go over 9.5. So for whatever reason, that total is very soft for him. So if you think 7, 8, 9 are potential landing spots for him, you're getting +160 right now on under 9.5. But
I don't see it as a Saints pick though. I think if you want to bet him under that, I think you almost just bet him to go to the Jets or bet him to go 7th exactly. Really feels light on the Carolina and the Carolina taking him, and the same thing goes with the Saints for me.
I could see the Saints taking him, but
Saints makes more sense than Carolina, but man, it's still
I do think they have other people on their board higher than that. I probably think the Saints would probably rather even take a tackle than Warren, but I imagine the Saints like Warren. I wouldn't rule it out there.
Yeah. Okay. The 8, we all think it's very likely defense, maybe a tiny sliver cut aside for tight end or wide receiver. But Jalen Walker and Mikel Williams do feel like the most likely candidates there. Saints could be trenches. They need so much though. God, they could go anywhere. If they take a tight end there with all the needs they have, it's kind of feels like, okay, good luck. What are you doing everywhere else?
I do hope they go defense. I know the line suffered last year, but a lot of it was injury stuff. and it's not like they're covered as bare on offensive line. And if two have gone, I don't know that they'll take Banks. You know, if something happens and we see Membu slide, it would be probably it'd be hard for them to pass in the second best tackle there. Obviously, so if things happen like Warren and Tet and maybe Michael Williams goes a little higher than we think and he's on the board, but man, something like if Walker falls to him, that feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I mean, even after acquiring some edge help. So the Saints are real weird in my head.
Mason Graham would probably be near the top of my list. I actually do think that Kelvin Banks is a major player in New Orleans. Not that I necessarily agree with it, but just kind of based on the intel I've been receiving, it sounds like the team likes Kelvin Banks. I don't know if it would be over Membu. I'd kind of be hard pressed to believe that, but I'm not really sure at this point. Mason Graham would throw a wrench into that. And so would Jalen Walker. Before today, I really thought there was a small chance that Jalen Walker was going to even be available for the Saints. Now, I think it's honestly, I mentioned 50-50 with the Panthers. Now I think it's closer to 50-50. And if he's available for the Saints, with Demario Davis being in a contract year and he's kind of their leader, he might retire after this year based on some things that I've heard. And Jalen Walker could be a nice like captain for that defense where he comes in, he takes Demario Davis' place and also provides like a situational pass rusher role with Cam Jordan getting old, et cetera. Mason Graham, Jalen Walker, and then Kelvin Banks and Tyler Warren would be my top 4 for the Saints there.
Okay, you are dancing right around the favorites right now at Bookmaker. Mason Graham is your second choice.
I swear I don't have it in front of me.
Your second choice. Michael Williams right now is the favorite to go 9 at plus 371.
I don't know if I'm buying that one as much. I'm kind of going a hot take there. I know that we did a lot of stuff at the UGA Pro Day, but I don't. The Saints drafted a defensive end in the second round last year, and they also just re-signed Chase Young to a pretty substantial contract, and that a lot of fans thought was an overpay. And I think there's more bodies there basically than people want to assume. And they still, I don't think they're going to give up on Foskey or Foskey, however you pronounce his name here. So I think that's a factor as well.
Okay.
Mason Graham, Carl Granderson, of course. Mason Graham, you could make the argument that they might not want to give up on Brian Bresee as well. They just drafted a defensive tackle 2 years ago. But I don't know. There are other DTs, Nathan Shepard, Kalen Saunders. They traded for Davin Gaucher, but they're kind of just like rotational players. I think Mason Graham would give them something different there. And certainly Jalen Walker. So I would kind of put Michael Williams as maybe 5th among that bunch of players there.
Okay. I like how our friend VR bought into the Genty Bears trade. It looks like he's sending Mason Graham to Chicago at the 10th overall pick, which is fun because obviously like that just gives you an A+ on the Jags draft that they got that guy in the end who they convinced everyone they didn't want, and they got him 5 picks later with additional stuff. I mean, Graham right now, for what it's worth, is 1427 to go 10th. But you know, the big risk you run there is that they make the trade and then somebody snags Graham, like the Raiders, which is very liable, the Saints, which you mentioned. So, so there's definitely scope for him not to be available at 10. I will say though that like we've kind of, I feel like, gotten the top 10 players correct, if not in the right order. We've mentioned them all. Here's the thing, Drew. We've mentioned 12. We've mentioned 11, right?
I think we've mentioned 12.
Michael would be the one that.
Michael's the 11.
If Carolina doesn't take him, I think he's like the most likely to fall out of the top 10, but he could go to 11 at San Fran. So I don't think Michael's going past 15 to Atlanta.
Who is the 12th?
We got the first 3 picks down.
Yeah.
And then we got Graham, Williams, Walker.
Yep.
And then we have the 3 offensive linemen if you include Banks.
Yep.
Right.
And then we've thrown in the tight end.
Yep.
and we've thrown in Tet.
Oh no, I don't have a spot. I don't have a spot.
No, I don't.
I have a sliver of him to Carolina, but if he's not going to Carolina, I don't know where his landing spot is in the top 10.
I don't think he's going to Carolina, but
there's this God, I think it was the Charles Robinson article where he interviewed some people, or he did some straw polling, and it seemed to indicate, and this has come from other places, that like a third of the league thinks he's a top 10 pick.
Yeah, Dane Brugler pointed out the Saints and I think the Panthers and maybe the Cowboys as 3 teams in the top 12 that would be viable candidates for McMillan. Dane is obviously awesome at his job, so like it's worth mentioning for sure. I don't necessarily see that. I think the Cowboys is probably actually his ceiling. Although even the eye concept, the notion that the Jaguars would be remotely interested in him at 5 does kind of lend some credence to the idea that there are teams that view him in very, very high regard. Throughout the whole process, he's been seen as a very polarizing player where grades are all over the place. I've had him in my 20s in my mock draft for like a very long time. But it don't, like they always say, it only takes one team, and if Dallas is that team, or the Saints come out and surprise us, they need some size at wide receiver. You can make some cases for players, but I just think it's like 5% outcomes at this point.
I don't think the Jets are out on him. Another one where we keep saying the Jets have given us nothing. It's a position of need. If they're one of the teams that thinks highly of him and they've talked themselves into it, like that ruins a bunch of.
It's a position of need, and he does, to make your case, he does complement Garrett Wilson pretty well, and the Jets just have nothing else at pass catcher. Although I'm going to counter my own counter here.
They have other needs.
Tyler Warren would kind of fill that need from a pass catching perspective and would help with blocking. So I would think that if the Jets do go pass catcher, I think it's going to be Warren over McMillan. But
I'm of the mind I don't buy the McMillan to the Jags team. I think that sounds like horse shit. It might just be hey, we like him, we're not drafting him. Like, he's high on our board. It ain't happening. There's 3 guys.
Well, if they move down to 10,
that could happen.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me other than the Jets. And then I guess you could make a small case for the Saints. I don't really think that's going to happen with their needs and what else is going to be available. But I'm with you there. If it's not the Jets, and I have that as under 10%, probability, I think, for the Jets. I think you're right. With the next spot he comes up is the Cowboys.
I'll tell you what, I'm kicking myself because before I went to Florida where I couldn't bet here, Mason Graham, I want to say 4 days ago he was 50-1 to go to the Saints to go to pick 9, I should say. And I put $2 on it. And I was just like, oh, it's a long shot. I don't want to, break the bank or anything. And now I'm just wishing, man, I should have been way more aggressive on that. But I also got Kelvin Banks going there 30-1 as well. And I put a little bit more on that. So I'm hoping now that the draft is kind of shaken up with this Genty thing that the Saints might take Graham or Banks. But yeah, a lot of Saints fans would be very disappointed in the Kelvin Banks selection, though, from what I have gathered throughout that nation here in New Orleans.
They haven't exactly nailed some of the offensive line picks lately.
Yeah, a lot of assets, a lot of draft capital has.
They
gone
still have
into
left guard available though, and remember that. And I think the argument is that Kellen Moore is coming from Philadelphia and Dallas, where they really prioritized offensive line there, building these trenches. And then left guards available for the Saints. Trevor Penning's a free agent next year, the right tackle. So I do think he's in play. And actually, I think the Saints are pretty high on him. But again, I'd probably put the Walker and Graham above him at this point.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to find out if there's any truth to this Bears-Jags pick-a-rooney swap, because Bears trading assets is still amazing. It's amazing concept to me because the 10th pick seems like a really good pick. Like, there's a lot of good players that will help.
Doesn't it feel like
help fit your needs, and one of them will be there. One of them will.
The trades, Drew, though, it feels like whenever there's this hey, this trade might happen, 100% horse shit.
Sure.
Every trade that we get is just foisted upon us by a Schefter tweet. It isn't like, hey, here's two teams that are talking. I mean, even the Bears Titans one, it was like there's a bunch of teams talking to the Bears and just like, oh, boom, it's done.
Yeah, no, but like the
trade rumor. I'm just saying the trade rumor stuff.
The CJ Stroud draft was the day of the draft. They did an ESPN like all hands pre-briefing. Here's what we're covering. Here's the stories we're following. And one of them was there's a deal in principle between the Titans and the Cardinals for the third pick, and the Titans' target was CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I get the day of. I'm saying this stuff that happens in the week leading up when it's like the Vikings trade, all the different Vikings trades, all the different Broncos trades last year. None of those seem to come through.
Yeah, okay, so your point is that it's probably bullshit. I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
I don't believe
all right, so the 11th pick, we're expecting Niners likely D-line. I don't know that it's worth diving into that more. There'll be somebody good there that they can take on.
Gravitated there pretty hard.
Yeah, Shamar Stewart and Walter Nolan are the two names that keep popping up on my end, where it's Robert Saleh always emphasized defensive line, always wants a big rotation there, and he's drafted by traits before. They have big needs on O-line and in corner as well, but I do think the best bet's probably or the favorite, I should say. I don't know if it's the best bet.
Edge.
I forgot I'm on a betting show here. The favorite should probably be defensive line here based on the history there. Stewart and Walter Nolan are the two names that I keep hearing for the Niners. Michael Williams, if he falls there. Is definitely another.
That brings us to an interesting team to talk about, which is the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Andy, did you watch any of the presser today, and did you glean anything from that besides we should stop putting a microphone in front of Jerry Jones?
I mean, yeah, that you kind of nailed the point there. I mean, and that's where I'm at too with the Golden news, the Golden linking him there. How much hot air has that man filled the air with? You know,
sure.
The Dallas Fort Worth area is 70% Jerry Jones's hot air. After the last 30 years, like he says a lot of shit that doesn't come true. So I don't know if I believe anything he says. I know where their needs are. I still kind of like them getting the top corner if it's there at that spot, and especially if the wide receiver they like, or if they wanted, maybe even tight end doesn't make as much sense. But if the wide receiver they like is gone, I'd like to see him go corner. But I think they're pretty tight ship because the one leak isn't actually leaking anything. He's just leaking sewage.
Okay, fair enough. The Cowboys, you got to read on whether they actually go wide receiver, Nick? Or do you think does this feel a little too convenient, a little too cute, like a little too kind of
happens a lot with the Cowboys?
It does happen a lot with the Cowboys.
I'm pretty sure they're going wide receiver. It does feel a little cute with the whole Texas player there. You have Matthew Golden, hometown, that. But Brian Schottenheimer, who has historically been very, very run heavy, very conservative of a coach. He was the Dallas selection to be head coach, and on one of a presser, he mentioned that they need to get more explosive on offense. God forbid anything happens to CeeDee Lamb, but also to open up CeeDee Lamb there. The explosive comment was kind of taken by mockers and draft bettors to mean it's got to be Matthew Golden. It was post 4.29 40 times. So I think that they prefer Golden over Tet, even though probably more teams have Tet higher on their board than Golden, from what I understand. But if I didn't go wide receiver, my next guess would be offensive line. I know they have defensive needs, but I really don't think that, based on the presser actually that y'all talked about, it sounds like they're not done with offensive line. The Dallas Cowboys were the only team to bring in Armand Membu for a 30 visit there. I found that pretty interesting. They've done their homework on several offensive linemen. They always take a player who has met with the team. And I'm going to read you out some of these 30 visits with the Cowboys, and you'll notice here that there's quite a few of them, including Kelvin Banks, who's also a Texas product right there. I mentioned Banks a lot, but there's quite a few of them along the offensive line. you're mainly getting Shamar Stewart also there, Michael Williams, but you're mainly getting wide receivers. They met with all 4 wide receivers, like to go to the top one. They met with Golden, they met with McMillan, they met with Burden and Igbuka. They've also met with Genty and Trevion Henderson. 2 explosive players there. So I'm buying that they want to get more explosive on offense. If I had to guess, this pick's going to be offense here. Maybe if Mimbu falls, this is probably his floor if I had to guess. I know that wouldn't make a lot of fans happy in Dallas, so I think they want the wide receiver. But Kelvin Banks, I think, and Mimbu are probably in play here for Dallas if it's not going to be Golden. I have them mock Golden right now.
Okay.
I was going to say if all 3 of your top tackles are gone at this point,
then I do think it kind of lends their hand a wide receiver.
Well, at that point, there's almost no chance that any wide receivers have been taken.
Well, here's the other problem, guys.
Because the Niners aren't taking it.
This is why I asked the question that way, though. You know what's not available in terms of personnel via draft day trades? Offensive line. Like, that's the only position that you are not acquiring like a blue chip player in this on draft Thursday.
Okay.
You know what? You know what you can get? A running back, a wide receiver. There's plenty of those. George Pickens, right? Like, and freaking Jerry Jones let the cat out of the bag a little bit on that too. In that, we're pursuing draft day trades, which to me is we're pursuing players to acquire. Not that we're sending our guys not sending Dak Prescott to Cleveland. Like that's not what he meant. But I the idea that he's going to bring in a running back and he's going to bring in a wide receiver via late round trade swap, pick swaps, that seems plausible to me. And using this this pick on a big body offensive or defensive line, I don't think should be ignored. So my antenna are up a little bit that they are not actually gonna fire on a wide receiver there, but we shall see. I guess as we kind of run down, if there's a team,
quick, though, Drew, too, on the offensive lineman stuff, I've really come around to closer to where you're at on that as far as a bunch of them going.
Oh, sure. Over 6.5 was a fun bet. That one, and that ship
actually
sailed.
Well, and actually something you pushed back on too, because I said, this team is going to take this guy or trade into this round for this guy. And you said, someone's going to trade for an interior offensive lineman. I think that's not crazy anymore. If you go look at what I mean, and somebody pointed this out in an article, I wish I'd give him credit, but you talk about positional value and what have you, comparing contracts and what you have to pay free agents to get a good player at that position later on. What interior offensive linemen have been getting paid lately and what some of the really good ones have been getting paid, like it's moved up the ladder. It is absolutely moved up the ladder. Teams are very much willing to go after, hey, I need a starting guard. I'm going to draft a starting guard. I might have to move up to get my guy. And I don't know if that was like a thing, even like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago where, like a really good center still, it's like, he's really, really, really good. He'll go in the back half.
So you're telling me the Vikings paid Will Fries so they didn't have to give up assets to go get Tyler Booker and Gray Sable.
I don't know. Well, man, they just needed it. I'm glad they went out and got it because that team was a very fun team who needed a lot of help in the middle. But I'm just saying, I do think there's like 5 other teams after we get past those first 3 that are just like, hey, this guy's a starting guard right now. I want him.
Yeah,
even if somebody you're bumping inside.
Yeah. Stop me when we get to a team where you have an interest in sort of what they want to do. It's probably every team, but be a little discerning here because we're an hour and 3 minutes into this. The Dolphins, they need everything. Let's just carry on. The Colts, they need a lot. I don't know. They really want to speculate too much.
Percentage here, quick fire on some of those teams that we're skipping. Percentage. Sure. All the corners are on the board. Percentage chance the Dolphins take a corner.
Pretty high.
Safeties. Yeah.
I think it's going to be over the safeties. Yeah. I think Will Johnson and Barron are higher on their boards than Starks and even Ward.
Okay. All right. 14 tight end
Colts.
percentage.
Tight end percentage, extremely high if Warren's there. I'm a little skeptical if Loveland's there. Everyone wants Loveland in the Colts fan base. It seems to fit, but Chris Ballard's put such an emphasis on RAS and testing and athletic scores, and Loveland doesn't have that because of the injury. I'm wondering if he's going to be a little wary to take him and prioritize a high athlete like Shamar Stewart offensive line, maybe even Zabel as a surprise pick. I'm a little wary about Loveland there, but I do think this is Warren's floor.
Okay. But we should have mentioned it when we were on the Pick 12, but the Ted McMillan wide receiver one, betters one. There was the only kind of interesting market on Bookmaker that had push-pull at all was wide receiver one.
Yeah.
Every other one was just one-way smushed.
One-way action.
That one actually had two-way, and as of today, probably as of the Brugler tweet, the Ted backers win. He's minus 375 right now to be the first wide receiver. Gold is out to
that's a lot of movement in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, as a big number. So I guess
I didn't see that coming. It felt like
I didn't either.
General sentiment among writers was golden.
Whoever loves him is
closer to 50-50.
Whoever loves him is being very, very quiet, except that they are telling someone that they love him, but that person is keeping the team very, very quiet because the breadcrumbs are not obvious to me. But we'll see. Assuming the Falcons at 15 do not trade down, we expect they take an edge.
Yeah, Jalen Walker is their prize target. I actually don't think it's out of the realm of possibility they move up for him. Michael Williams, I think this is his floor in Atlanta. Yes. Other players I've heard here, Kelvin Banks, Armand Membu, probably their floor as well. I know that's O-line. And then lastly, Mike Green is another player who they might overlook some character concerns to fill a position of need. They were in on Letu last year and kind of went Penix instead. So, yeah, Walker and Michael Williams, I think, are their top options here.
Very cool. Do you have a read at all on the Cardinals?
I had a better read until Derek Harmon got kind of dinged with some medicals. No, he got reported that he was. I had Harmon sliding here. I think that they really, really want Michael Williams. A beat writer that I trust really says it comes down to if Michael's off the board, that they really like Derek Harmon and Kenneth Grant. That's kind of a surprise pick for the Cardinals, but he's more in play now that we've seen Derek Harmon he's got some medical issues. I'm still kind of researching exactly on what they were, how much he could fall, but he is a guy I had mocked in the late teens, and now it's looking like maybe late 20s is more appropriate there. So yeah, D-line probably for the Cardinals, maybe a Will Johnson team, but D-line.
Okay. D-line for the Bengals? Over 50%?
I'm on team D-line for the Bengals. A lot of people are on team safety with Sark, Stream, and Worry. I think it's a little too rich there. They probably like them, but to me, it's maybe Mike Green, Derek Harmon, Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan is the guy.
They could go corner
there
as well.
So Walter Nolan, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Seahawks.
I mean, if we still have one of the two top corners on the board, I don't think that's out of their wheelhouse either. It feels like
they need defensive back.
It's just basically everywhere. But I'm saying over either of the safeties. If Barron or the Michigan kid's still there.
I agree with you. They have a lot of expiring contracts within the secondary, like as in players who are coming on their last year of their contract. Like they're pretty decimated along the defensive line and secondary. Those are the two main areas.
So Andy mentioned Barron. First time we've mentioned him on the pod. He has been very aggressively bet under 18.5 for reasons that remain completely unknown.
Didn't you see the reports today?
What?
He got good medical news. So? Again, it doesn't. Well, that's
that means he's going to go under 18.5. There's no team that I see that clearly
he dropped because of the medical stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then they said, well, he'll be back for training camp, or he'll be fine for training camp.
You're not talking about Campbell. You're not doing Jihad Campbell.
No, I thought that was the Barron stuff.
I didn't know the Barron ever had a red flag. I think Jihad Campbell had the red flag, and he got a note from his doctor that said he would be able to play. I'm looking but Barron's he's like an elite player, but he's a nickel. He's a big nickel, so it's like not clear that he will be. Because
it's just all over again in his arms. Actually, basically it's his length. It's unprecedented to be a top 20 pick, from what I understand, to have his measurables. However, this is a pretty weak draft class with lacking corners specifically. So, yeah, I think that top 20 is live, but I do think it's probably going to be late teens. Miami's probably at 13, his ceiling there.
His over was minus 190 at one point, over 18.5. It's now plus money. So there has been a big shift in opinion of where Barron gets drafted.
What is it at? 19 and a half or 18 and a half?
18 and a half. His under is now minus 155.
Okay,
so,
well, that would lend credence to the idea that Cincinnati might be in play. And
that could be.
And I think that's fine too, moving it, because I don't ever feel like Tampa was in the market for that position. And I was talking Jihad Campbell. I was way off base there. That's why I was so confused. I'm like, what are we talking? We're not talking about the same person. But I think, like, you talked about the measurables, and it's the same kind of thing. And I think that's why I did this. I think a lot of teams just like, I don't know if I can this is my day one starter on the outside. It feels like he's a nickel guy, and guys like that go in the 40s. So it is crazy.
Yeah, like with Cooper DeJean last year, everybody knew he was going to be a great nickel player immediately. He was, but somehow, some way,
it's such a weak class. It's just like, oh, guess what? You might be a top 20 pick this year. Just kind of how it bounces.
Okay,
make a lot extra money though.
Offensive line for the Seahawks is 80%.
I think Gray Zabel's probably the apple of their eye, but Colson Loveland, another target there. I could see them going like a Malachi Starks as well. Their defensive coordinator there is it comes from Baltimore, and it puts kind of an emphasis on the safety in that defense. So Loveland, Starks, and Zabel are the three players that I'm kind of targeting there for the Seahawks.
I like that if they could have a Hamilton-esque bloom up from a safety. That works out. I have seen people mock wide receiver there. I don't like it. With what's going to be available and who they need, don't love it.
They have met with some. They've shown interest in wide receiver, to be fair, especially Igbuka. And I mean, that's a little redundant of a skill set, to be honest with you. But
surely, yeah.
But yeah, and Ted McMillan's probably the best fit, like from my XO football standpoint. But they put such an emphasis on character, and I'm just not sure if I'm not sure if they don't have Golden or Igbuka higher. It's tough to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ted has some loafing issues, apparently. He's a loafer.
Yeah, if you say so. Tampa Bay edge, 50%. Is that high?
I think that's pretty high. I've heard they really like Donovan Ezeruku. There, Albert Breer's noted he's a popular there. However, that's probably higher than his range.
Okay,
I would say
this is a possible Campbell spot too. I think.
Top end. I do think Jihad Campbell's another popular mock pick there. I'm just concerned about the medicals. He makes a lot of sense from a fit standpoint, though. Like a lot of sense, like way too much sense. Like so much sense that it's like once they take him and people don't put him there, you're like, oh yeah, that was pretty obvious. But Jahdae Barron, we mentioned, we don't have a spot for him. Tampa Bay had issues in the secondary last year, so maybe Will Johnson falls or Jahdae Barron, maybe they could land here. Even Malachi Starks, I could see them taking Starks as well.
Okay. The Broncos almost certainly look like they will take a skill position player. Where do you go between running back, wide receiver, and tight end for them?
I only really have 4 players for the Broncos. I have Amari and Hampton, and then Travion Henderson are the 2 running backs there. I've heard a lot of buzz about Henderson lately. I've had Hampton mocked there for like a month and a half, but I would hate to have to flip last minute, but I've been hearing a lot of Henderson steam. Colson Loveland was mocked by everyone there until they signed Evan Ingram. I actually don't think Evan Ingram kind of precludes them from taking Loveland, so I'm still putting him on the short list, if you will. And the only defender I've seen mocked, or the only defender I think I have intel on being them interested in is Derek Harmon. However, with the medicals, I think it becomes less likely here.
Okay. Final mock.
They kind of feel like the opposite of Atlanta. Like if they don't go offense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we doing, guys? Steelers in the end. Are you taking a quarterback there, or are you taking?
I think I'm probably going to take a quarterback there. I just can't imagine their plan is to sign Aaron Rodgers after. Like, how can they feel good about that? I don't know.
What their plan was last year, right?
It was bad. I mean, how can they?
How could that have been their plan?
Yeah,
well, it was. They're happy going to war with Mason Rudolph. Apparently.
Players that, if they don't take a quarterback, players I've heard them linked to are Amari and Hampton, Matthew Golden, Derek Harmon, and Nick Ward.
Okay. What in the world are we expecting out of the Chargers?
I'm going stereotypical here. I'm expecting a Michigan player. Will Johnson.
Michigan player. Okay.
Will Johnson can fall here because of his bad draft process. I think Jim Harbaugh would scoop him up. Jim Harbaugh also might be privy to Colston Loveland's medical situation, maybe turning a blind eye there, being optimistic. He's always emphasized tight end in his offense dating back for like a decade. And then Kenneth Grant is the other Michigan player. So you have 3 Michigan players that they can choose from. McMillan, Matthew Golden, Derek Harmon, other players on the list. But the 3 Michigan players are literally at the top of my board for the Chargers, whether it's Will Johnson, Colston Loveland, or Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant's the biggest need. Like from a need perspective, the defensive line is barren. However, I don't know. Colston Loveland's kind of my instinct there. Okay.
You've named him a lot. He's going somewhere to a lot of teams between 14 and 22 then. Okay.
Well, then we'll put Kenneth Grant there for the Chargers.
Okay. All right. The Packers.
I think this is McMillan's floor, probably.
Really?
McMillan. I think the Packers are in on him. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that they are. It's a Packers type. They're very big on measurables. Other players I think they're in on include Derek Harmon, who I've also mentioned a lot, Donovan Ezeriku, and Maxwell Hairston, the corner. First time I've mentioned him. And also first time I'm going to mention Josh Simmons as well, offensive tackle there. So again, McMillan, Harmon, Ezeriku, Hairston, and Simmons. And I know it's kind of a long list of different positions, but
this is the way it goes. Yeah.
It is. The Packers have a type.
Yeah.
Getting their true wide receiver one would be nice. If they are high on McMillan and he's there, that feels like a great pick. And then anything defensive line, although they haven't had the best of luck at times.
I keep hearing McMillan's not a wide receiver one. I know. I'm kidding.
Some people are so cold. I'm not sure we've had a wide receiver that was like, this far yo-yoed, where some people are like this.
The Packers would play him as a one.
I'm kind of surprised with the Vikings mocks that I'm seeing, because it feels like they left themselves a pretty good hole to fill with safety. And there's good safeties that will be available for them when they're picking 24th. And there's also been a healthy amount of speculation that this is the spot that a team trades up into round 1 for a quarterback.
Right. They lack that.
Yeah. What's your prognosis?
Same as yours. Safety is the chalk there with even Worry or Starks. I would tend to believe they prefer Starks if given the choice. Yeah. Jahdae Barron is another option there. This is probably
that'd be great.
His floor, based on at least the new betting odds, I guess. I would have said the Rams are his floor, but maybe that's a little low. Barron, Flores wants a defensive back who can tackle well and be a leader there. Even Worry Starks, Barron. Derek Harmon's another player I keep hearing mentioned there. Gray Zabel and Donovan Jackson are the offensive line. Like they have a hole at, I believe, left guard. So they did fix a lot of their offensive line. They brought in Freeze, as you mentioned earlier, but they have one spot still open there. And you need a player who can play in a zone blocking system, and Zabel and Donovan Jackson are just that.
Oh, interesting. Would love to, man, if Donovan Jackson goes 24, my goodness.
Yeah, that's probably his
over 6.5 offensive lineman is home at that point.
And he played tackle in college. To be clear, I would be projecting him to, if the Vikings draft him there, they'd probably slide him in at guard. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You mentioned the Rams may be in the secret sneaky quarterback market. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say if the Rams want it. Did I skip? They're taking an offensive line. I don't care who.
Percentage.
Ibuka or offensive line.
Ibuka or offensive line. Yeah.
There's a chance it's wide receiver.
Booker or Ibuku, 40, and then 20%
even
crazy
Simmons,
something else.
Simmons is on the table. I don't think that's a bad fit.
Okay.
Anyone.
It might be.
The Rams to me are interesting when you mentioned that they could potentially be a sneaky quarterback team. I got a outrageous prediction for you. If they have any interest in if they have any interest in Shedeur Sanders, get him in the second round. I'm just not seeing any fit for him or any interest with a team at all, even at the top of the second now, which is crazy. But him sliding to the Rams with their second pick, don't be surprised if and when it happens. They do not need to reach for him in round 1, in my opinion. If they are out, though, in quarterback, where are they going with the 26th pick?
Jordan Rodri, great beat writer for the Rams, mentioned 3 needs for the Rams that they're trying to fix this offseason. Wide receiver, well, that was done by Devontae Adams. I think Matthew Golden, if he doesn't go to the Cowboys, he could fall. They would pick him here. He brings something that Devontae Adams and Puka do not. Jahdae Barron, probably his ultimate floor here. They need some help in the secondary. Colston Loveland, though, is this is probably the Rams tried to make a move for Brock Bowers last year, and they failed. Loveland's another move. Tight end Jordan Rodgers, you mentioned tight end as an option there. Higbee's in a contract year. Offensive tackle Josh Simmons would be my next guess after Loveland. So assuming that Barron or Golden are gone, I would say Loveland and Simmons would be the main targets here. Rob Havenstein, the right tackle, is in a contract year as well, so he expires after this year.
Okay. Correction and retractions. The Rams don't have their second round pick. It belongs to the Carolina Panthers. So they may be waiting till the third round, and they still have a chance at him. Who the heck knows? But that feels unlikely, I guess. Does that matter more if they just have one pick then in the good part of the draft, where they go with it?
Feels like you have to go harder for it towards need at that point.
Then. It sure does.
Because you can't just fill it with volume later. Like, I will take 3 shots at wide receiver / tight end later in the draft. It's same thing with that. That's kind of where I'm at with Minnesota as well, where I don't think they get too wild with it because they lack, if they don't trade. I still think that's probably a pretty high percentage chance that Kwesi's obviously going to take some calls, but he might actually act on that. But Minnesota's the same way, where it feels like they have to go a little closer towards need. Some people have the luxury of realizing like we don't have to reach here. We can fill that other ways.
The Ravens to me feel like an edge rush team. We haven't mentioned much or talked much about Shamar Stewart, who I think kind of not outrageous given where they're picking and the fact that he was so unproductive and had the athletic traits. Do you think that is a realistic slide there, or will he be gone already?
I think it's possible, but I wouldn't call it likely. Okay. Based on intel I've been receiving that he's actually going to go in the teens. There's just a lot of teams needing edge rushers in the teens, and he's just so much of a freak athlete that one of these teams like the Niners or the Bengals or those are the main 2 teams I'm hearing, but maybe even the Cardinals might be interested in him as well. The Colts are another team that prioritizes athleticism. So there's a couple teams in there that could. I do agree with what you're saying, though, about the Ravens being interested if he is there, because they met with him. They had a 30 visit with them. They need defensive line pretty badly. Donovan Ezeruku is another player who would be probably more in this range that they could take on the D-line. The players that I think they really want to fall are Malachi Starks and Tyler Booker.
I don't think so. Good luck to them. I will personally, just sort of the way the draft is going to break and just the way that these teams are kind of rostered currently. The 2 teams that I would be really, really surprised if they don't come away with edges are the Ravens and the Niners. Like they you kind of have your hands kind of forced, guys. You got to do it. And I'm mostly looking at the Ravens and the way that their edges are structured, not this year, but in years forward. Like if they don't get an elite edge out of this draft, like what are you doing with that position next year, guys?
You're absolutely right. The contract years are a big deal in Baltimore for I think it's defensive tackle too. I'm actually pulling up right now to confirm.
D-line.
Yeah. But Van Noy, Owe, Jabo, and Travis Jones on defensive tackle. So yeah, that's a good bit.
Yeah.
That's where did we say Kenneth Grant? Were we fine with that too, or is that not just because they're sturdy there? But I mean, again, we're throwing a ton of names out, and they can't all go.
Sure.
No, I think Kenneth Grant could go as high as like Arizona Cardinals, honestly. But I also think that you mentioned like people having a wide range of opinion on Ted McMillan. I think Kenneth Grant is like the defensive side of that, where some of these teams probably even view him. Mel Kiper and McShay said that some teams have 2nd-round grades on him because of the weight issues. But I also think I've also heard from Charlie Campbell and others that like some teams see him as like a teens player. So yeah.
Okay. You got a finger on the pulse of the Lions?
Might be drafting in the teens.
Speaking of Kenneth Grant, the Lions might be interested in the kind of the Michigan product there in Detroit. So he's an option there. Defensive line's probably the priority for Detroit. They like having players that can do both, set the edge and rush the passer. Ezeruku, maybe. Derek Harmon for sure. Kenneth Grant is an option. If they go offensive guard, I'm thinking Zabel or Booker there.
Okay. The commies. They, for what it's worth, the intel that I've gotten, and this is again firsthand stuff, so I don't remember if I shared this with you guys, but the intel I've gotten is that they are very aggressively trying to trade down. And if they don't trade down, the names of the guys that they were interested in were guys I had never heard of. I was like, who? But they were like edges and cornerbacks. So kind of look good. So I kind of think we've named all of the guys that we know are going to go in the first round, and then everybody from here, these last four to me feel like either scraps or surprises are possible, or who knows what. But
I think this could be a Jihad Campbell spot.
Sure.
If cool with his medicals.
Sure.
Nick Amenwari, Nick Scorton, and then maybe running back. If Amari Hampton or Henderson's there, I could kind of see that. A lot of people are also mocking Emeka Egbuka here because they just don't see a better fit for him.
Yeah. I gotta tell you guys real quick on the Emeka Egbuka thing. I played some under 29.5 for him. Largely just because there was a couple people who were like implying that his floor was in the high 20s. And now that's completely evaporated. And I don't know where his home is. But
it's hard to find a home. But everyone says he's going around 1, but it is hard to find a home spot.
We just did it. We're on 29 at this point, and we haven't really found a great home for him.
The bridge, I gotta tell you, the bridge jumper that hurt me the most last year was under wide receivers. And the fact that there was a Ricky Pearsall went 31st, and then the Panthers traded up for Xavier Legette for some reason. Like the fact that there was that 1-2 at the end broke my draft last year. And if Egbuka doesn't find a home in round 1 and slides in round 2 this year, I'm just going to be like, okay, well, this is the universe telling me to stop doing this. But I'm worried about him right now. Very worried that there's no landing spot for him.
What was the price on that? I mean, how bad was the price on that?
When I got involved?
Yeah, you weren't laying like 400 or anything crazy.
No, it was like -1 something. Okay. And it's moved out. Yeah, I mean, it's moved in my favor, but I'm losing confidence because I don't see where he's going.
I'm fine with that Egbuka dropping.
He's -240 right now. I laid the last bet I made was -167.
So my bridge jumper for the year is I played 1 to 2. I laid -200 on over 14.5 SEC players because
it's
every time
now for what it's worth.
Every time I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this guy could drop. And who would they take? And it's 2 other SEC players.
I can't even count because I don't even know what teams
like.
Are in the conference anymore.
Egbuka drops, maybe Bird and Ryan. It's just all these. It's like, oh, maybe then we get the other safety, the South Carolina safety. Then he's in the first round. It's like, if this guy drops, then
I think you're in good shape there.
Old
but I
Amos might
get
picked. Like it just there's just a wave of them in that spot, and obviously Egbuka's bad for me. Tyleik Williams bad. There's a couple that are borderline there, but man, there's a lot of SEC guys between 25 and 40.
Speaking of guys, and also speaking of running back options, the Bills pick 30th. And do you guys have your finger on the pulse of James Cook being a Bill in 2025?
Fitty.
Okay.
It feels like it might just be the lesser of two evils for him, or he just has to bite the bullet.
Yeah, is there a reason nobody's mocking them a running back when all of these running backs that we hear about are kind of talked about at the end of round 1, and their 2.5 is just sitting there?
I think it'd be
what's
the number secondary.
The number on Bills to take a running back specifically, 38-1.
Well, you kind of got to bet that, don't you?
I don't understand.
I've heard worse bets before. It would really piss him off.
I bet on the Pope today.
Like he would be gone. They may have to trade him the next day. But yeah, I think it's just the other needs on defense that people are just kind of like thinking Kenneth Grant, maybe the safety, Malachi Starks, even Worry works. They've done a lot of homework on cornerback. I think corner is probably their weakest need on paper. Okay. So Trey Amos, Maxwell Harrison, Siobhan Revel.
Yeah. The last two are easy. We're just going to give the Chiefs whatever best offensive lineman is available.
Well, Josh Simmons is probably going to be available due to character concerns.
Okay.
In my mock, at least, he could go higher because his ceiling's so high. But in my mock, I'm struggling to find a team with him if it's not the Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs have a certain amount of like desperation and to protect Mahomes after that Super Bowl.
Sure.
To where they never get to pick an elite offensive tackle talent-wise in picking in the 30s every year. So to me, it just makes a lot of sense for Andy Reid to say, hey, let's get back to the trenches. Let's overlook some of these character issues. We have a good locker room here. We'll be all right. He might be immature for now, but we'll take him and develop him. And we just need we need to get Mahomes a left tackle.
Okay. Last one.
If they fix both tackle spots, I mean, Jesus, you're already such a good team. Good job. Have another one.
This tight end is in the mix there too. Travis Kelce ain't getting any younger. I will say this, that whatever they pick is a luxury because you have Pat Mahomes, so they're still gonna be in the mix. Easiest prediction of first round of the draft is that Howie Roseman does it again. How he does it again takes either amazing player falls to him or he makes an amazing move with this pick.
Yeah, it'll be like Walter Nolan
or both somehow.
Mark Stewart or something like that.
Yeah, right. In seriousness, what are the chances that the Eagles make this pick? And if they do, where are they going?
I think they're going to stick and pick probably, unless like the Browns or someone comes in for a quarterback, like we mentioned earlier. Jimmy Kempski seems to believe that they're going defensive line. Nick Scorton was a name that was mentioned. James Pierce, he's got character issues, and the Eagles kind of afford that luxury. Donovan Azariku, I think, is a really, really good fit there. And the first on his board was Walter Nolan. So I think this is probably Walter Nolan's floor if he does fall due to the kind of immaturity stuff that I've been hearing about. I think it's probably best to bet D-line. I'll throw out Mason Taylor. I'm not really buying it, but Daniel Jeremiah is buying it, and he's way more credible than I am and knows a lot more than I do. And he's also very tight with the Eagles.
Yeah, he knows people there. Yeah,
he knows people in Philadelphia, Howie Roseman in particular. And Jeremiah mentioned basically that Mason Taylor is a back half of the first player. Nobody else was saying that. And a lot of people are connecting dots saying he's probably saying that because Howie Roseman's telling him that.
And or Dallas Goddard, Andy's guy.
Right. He's on the trade block.
So he may not be an Eagle, so they may have a glaring need at tight end. Okay.
There's
just real quick story time.
Mark Anderson probably on the block as well.
That's
weird. It's weird.
That is going to the number of veteran players who are likely to be moved on day one and day two. Yeah. I don't think anyone's wrapped their head around it because like there was a lot of like, be ready for some trades. The free agent class sucks. There's just gonna be a lot of trades, and none of them happened. Like a handful of players got traded, and none of them mattered. And there are still a lot of guys who didn't get contracts, who are kind of bona fide vets with roles, who are going to find new teams. I'm thinking. Okay. Real quick story time on Howie Roseman and the Eagles before we move on. Did you guys watch any of the off-season Hard Knocks last year with the Giants?
I saw some clips.
You saw some clips? Did you yeah. The clip that I saw I watched hardly any of it. Hard Knocks is not for me as much as I like football. The clip that I saw that was fascinating was at some point they showed their board. And there were two guys that were cornerbacks. And Giants, one of their big needs last year was cornerback. So presumably they were doing some of their homework on the guys who were first-round cornerbacks. And they had medical red flags for both Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And when the draft happened, I remember being like, how the fuck did the Eagles end up with both of these guys? Like, how is this happening? Like, what in the world? And then you see after the fact, you see the Giants board and you're like, they injury red flagged those two guys. And then you're like, did they like seed the rest of the information?
It's Inception.
You got Leo,
they're down there, the room's spinning.
Oh, I'm very much in the because like I
God.
didn't hear about those guys
We
having
need a
injury red flags
conspiracy
at all. So why in the world were they on injury red flags on the Giants board? Like what the heck? Because guess what? They were healthy and they were good. So that was a little funny and shocking to me last year. So I'm gonna have a good laugh when we find out that some guy with character concerns who's sliding on day one gets scooped by the Eagles, and it turns out, oh no, he was actually just fine. Because the same thing was with Jalen Carter. The rumors and the innuendo about him were
he was going to prison,
so
man.
bad. They were so bad, and he's a perfectly fine contributor to a championship defense. He is a monster.
We all
So
did
yeah,
stupid shit when we were younger.
I guess so. Yeah.
So,
Anyway,
so we got to 32 there. We got most of the names that we think are going there. Is there anyone else you want to flag plant as far as like, I have this guy as, I mean, we've mentioned Siobhan, East Carolina. Was it Revel or Revel? I have not decided yet how to say his last name. I mean, we mentioned him. We mentioned Hairston, who's
I shouldn't
maybe
have checked,
borderline.
I just
But
checked
like, yeah,
the
somebody who's
score.
borderline that you think is more likely to go into the first than consensus, I guess. Plant a flag, Nick.
I'll go ahead and I'm going to steal Charlie Campbell's flag. I'm going to go ahead and get. First of all, actually, I'll go with Nick's. Never mind. I was going to go with. I actually can't even pronounce his name. Tumaloa, JT Tumaloa.
Oh, yeah. The Ohio
Lions
State. Yep.
Specifically. I think Charlie's on to something there. But I'm actually going to take a different one. I'm going to go ahead and go Nick Scorton to either the Commanders or Eagles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm sorry.
I don't know if I'm going to mock it, but
time.
you're asking me for a surprise pick. So, yeah.
Just a brutal sequence in Bucks Pacers for the Bucks.
I wondered if you weren't watching basketball.
Well, I was kind of keeping an eye on it. I was like, ooh, the Bucks are making a nice little run. Ooh, they're within 2 points. And then bang, three, back-to-back threes, missed finger roll layup for Giannis. Like, oh, this is just absolutely crushing.
I
can't
tailed Siege on the Boston over. Okay. So shout out Siege.
Yes.
Got me a winner. I got to plant my flag. Landon Jackson. Just because he's Landon Jackson. Just because he's an edge, and there's all those teams at the top.
Is he an SEC edge?
He is. Arkansas still.
Oh, okay, cool.
Ain't they?
Yeah, they are.
I just a kind of a wild card pick for some of those 4 or 5 teams in the last 5-6 picks that are looking at edge.
I can dig it. All right. Before we wrap up, Nick, thank you for you're very generous with your time tonight. You're from New Orleans.
Yes.
And we have a lot of deep dive listeners who are deeply in touch with the city of New Orleans from a tourism standpoint. I would say very easily top 3 city in the US for me, easily. Anything you want to tell the listeners about in terms of food and drink recs, or when they come to the city, stuff they should be into?
Oh man, let's see.
I know what I would do.
What would you do?
I'd drop acid and recreate that scene from Easy Rider.
I don't know if I recommend that. All that.
It seemed pretty chill.
No, we go to this place in Covington a lot, which is across the lake. And we go to this place called Cured on Columbia a lot. We go almost like once a weekend, actually. So that's probably our favorite restaurant spot down there.
Cured on Columbia over in Covington. Wow, that's a trip. Okay, cool. Looks cool. That looks like a good exploration. Yeah. All right, man. Well, we appreciate your time on this, and congratulations on all the good work throughout this draft cycle. I wasn't kidding when I said multiple people requested your input. So definitely much appreciated. And good luck, man. I think.
Thanks. I'm nervous as hell, to be honest with you. I care about this shit a lot, but thank y'all way more than I should.
You wore a gray shirt. You didn't sweat through it, so. Down in Florida, not even showing the sweat stain. So I think you managed.
And if you're new to Nick's content, and if Nick is new to you, check him out at Fantasy Law Guy. I'm assuming that means you're a lawyer by but with your day job. But whatever the case is, good luck on the mock. I hope it absolutely crushes. And we'll, of course, share any nuggets that we get as we come up to the submission deadline.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been awesome.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
All right. That's probably it for us for draft content.
I mean, we have dailies. We'll talk, I'm sure.
We'll do NBA tomorrow, man.
We
Maybe.
will do.
If I feel like talking about the NBA, let's lock by 8.
I got nothing until the Timberwolves come in, boys.
All right. Well,
I
best
think
luck.
Memphis is done.